Hello, my internet friends. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the games that matter to us. What games matter to you? What games matter to me? Been going on in my brain for a little while now because I've been thinking, I listen to podcasts and I listen to an MMO podcast called Massively OP. Really enjoy it, but it covers a genre of games that used to matter a lot to me and I don't play anymore. And one game in particular called Star Wars Galaxies. This was an early MMO. The first, it was, I would say it's a second generation MMO. Once the kind of groundwork had been laid by games like EQ, EverQuest, Meridian 59, and Ultima Online, a new crop of MMOs started to show up, and they were graphically, for the time, high graphical quality, many more features. A lot of the basics of MMO design had kind of taken shape, but people were still experimenting. And on the back of the license for Star Wars, SOE, Sony Online Entertainment, at the time, now called Daybreak, the company has disbanded, got the Lucasfilm license and decided to create an MMO. The kind of audience that it brought in was an audience like me, a Star Wars fan for many, many years and interested in MMOs. In fact, I bought my first PC in order to play MMOs. It was a new sphere of gameplay that I'd never experienced. I'd always played at most maybe two-player with someone in the room with me playing on consoles. The idea of being in an alternate world where there were many, many, many thousands of people was amazing. And it was the lure of this idea of alternate worlds that MMOs seemed to offer that I think attracted people early on to the genre. It was released in a very buggy state, what we would now call early access, I guess it was. You were able to purchase an early version of the game and play the beta. It's almost become a business practice now, what the early stages of the development of Star Wars Galaxies was. And in the run-up to the game, I was able to join guilds, learn how to socialize online. That was my introduction to socialization online. It was through MMOs and specifically this game called Star Wars Galaxies. And when it was released, it was very, very rough, but it had a lot of stuff that fed into that idea of the alternate world. You could buy a house, you could have a career, you could be very, very unusual things by today's standards, a chef, or somebody who mined, or somebody who skinned animals for a living, someone who trained animals for a living, someone who set up a business, ran a shop. It really gave you that sense of living in an alternate world. Why it was so important to me, one of the things I wanted to mention was I don't think you can separate games from who you are as a person at the time that you play them. The most obvious example is the games that you play as a child. Generally, people have very, very fond memories of throughout their lives. Even as time goes on and those games, the mechanics get older and older, those early experiences are kind of formative. But it's not strictly just childhood where that happens. I think it can happen at different stages of your life. And I played Star Wars Galaxies at a time when I'd gone through college, university, and that's what we call in the UK higher education. But you come to the end of your college career, and unless you want to be an academic or go a little bit further, that's the point at which you're spat out of education and expected to join the real world. And for me, the real world was lacking for many reasons that I won't go into here, but I definitely needed an escape. And Star Wars Galaxies provided that at that time in my life. So a lot of that socialization that I learned how to socialize online was because I found myself alone in reality. All my friends from school had moved to different parts. I wasn't working in the field that I wanted to work in, felt very isolated. And Star Wars Galaxies in that alternate world gave an escape. I used to love traveling across these what seemed like incredibly expansive worlds on my speeder bike, pretending that I was this guy in the Star Wars universe. And the fact that the game didn't specify that you needed to be a hero. Stuff would happen later that would change that, but you were essentially just a small, very small cog in a massive wheel of a universe. But of course, as time goes on, the nature of games changes and things develop. At the time at which Star Wars Galaxies was at its height, and EverQuest at the time was probably reached its height, hundreds of thousands was considered a successful MMO. What happened was that a game called World of Warcraft, which we all know, was released and revealed to the game development community, I guess, and companies interested in making MMOs, that the audience for MMOs was not in the hundreds of thousands. It was actually millions upon millions of people were interested. If you did seemingly a few key things and made the game a little bit easier to follow, a little bit more linear, and took away a few of those elements that were the big attraction for me of Star Wars Galaxies, you could reach an audience of millions. You know, the choice of careers are less, the systems involved in the various professions less complex, so that you're on more of a linear path, objectively, obviously a fun path, because a lot of people played that, but some of the elements that you're looking for in that alternate world were a little bit lacking. But as with any love affair, they eventually come to an end, and unless you get married, but this wasn't to happen. The licensee, Lucasfilm, decided that it wasn't reaching the audience they wanted. They wanted more of adventure. So they made a bunch of sweeping changes, which came to be known as the NGE, the New Game Experience, which really changed the game fundamentally. And a lot of those early players like myself fell out of love with it. But to this day, it's a game that I continue to think about. And I listen to podcasts like Massively Overpowered that are about MMOs. I realize that experience I still want. I still want that alternate world experience. So ultimately, these are my random thoughts, but I wanted to ask you about the games that have meant an awful lot to you, that keep cropping up in your thoughts. Those games that you hold dear, that maybe came along for you at just the right time in your life. What are those games for you? I'd love to hear about that in the comments, so let me know. I've been Napyet. Thank you for listening. I've been rambling on about Star Wars Galaxies, and I'll speak to you later.